the massacre of at least 49 worshippers at a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. The suspected killer is a self-professed white supremacist who made clear that he was targeting Muslims. The attack has, of course, generated strong reactions among the global Muslim community. Here's some of that.
We will never find happiness in our lives unless we live peacefully. If there is peace, there is love and kindness, and there is an understanding that we must be good to one another. We must always be just in the way we judge one another. One of the main roots of terrorism is, I believe, the amount of injustice in the world.
This reflects that whoever the perpetrator is, or whatever the motives may be, they do not possess humanity in them. These actions are far from religious values, and even against common sense. Humans aren't supposed to do these kinds of things.
This incident shows that all over the world, Muslims are called terrorists. But what I'm saying is that they are the main terrorists, those who are killing Muslims. Muslims are carrying the blame as terrorists, and I hate those who are killing Muslims so much.
It is a very sad incident. It often happens that these non-Muslims do things against our religion. They carry out attacks on places of Muslim worship. When will Muslims wake up? Muslims should wake up and do something against anti-religious elements.
Well, joining us now from Washington will be Shahed Amanullah. He's the former senior advisor at the U.S. State Department. But first, let's go to Istanbul and speak to Omer Kablan. He is a TRT World correspondent. And Omer, some of the strongest reaction seems to be coming out of Turkey. Could you describe what you're hearing and seeing there?
Absolutely. Now, Turkey was one of the first countries to condemn this, and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called it a terrorist attack instantly. Now, of course, Turkey is an important country in the Muslim world, in the greater region here in the Middle East and in Europe. And the Turkish president had a very strong stance. He also briefly spoke with the Prime Minister of New Zealand. He sent his condolences, but he said that this is an example of the rising racism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia in the world. And he also, as you mentioned, one of the alleged suspects, he said in his manifesto, Turkey was also a target, along with him personally. And of course, as TRT World as well, we were covering this story all day, and we spoke to people on the streets as well. And of course, today is Friday, and it is the most important day of the week for Muslims. And people were in shock, but also in anger, because day in, day out, they consistently see that Muslims are being targeted more and more. Of course, following the Turkish president, we heard a very strong statement by Turkey's Prime Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu. And he said that it is not only the perpetrators responsible, but he said he also blamed Western media and Western politicians who are constantly pushing an agenda of xenophobia, racism, and hatred.
Well, let me go to Shahed on Washington on that, Shahed, because I noticed in your Twitter feed today, you wrote that the shooter, who, as far as we know at this point, acted alone, was, quote, was inspired by a right-wing ideological infrastructure that thrives, recruits, and radicalizes online. Could you just expound on that?
Sure. You see, this person spelled out for us in obvious terms what I think we should have realized a long time ago, that he is part of a transnational violent movement that is seeking to connect dots from Jews being killed in Pittsburgh to Sikhs being killed in Wisconsin to young children being gunned down in Norway. And he sees himself as part of this transnational civilizational struggle. If we don't start treating it like that transnational terrorist movement that it is, we're going to keep dismissing them as one-offs, as lone wolves, as something to just mourn and then move on. We have to stop doing that. When Osama bin Laden declared a war on the West, we took him at his word and we took him seriously. These people are doing the exact same thing. It's about time we took them as seriously as we did that.
Yes. Omer, now I want to look, since you are TRT World correspondent, let's look beyond Turkey and the wider Muslim world and the likely reaction and impact that this shooting will have across really the global Islamic community.
Absolutely. It wasn't just Turkey, of course, who was condemning this. To many countries around the Muslim world. We heard Qatar call it brutal terrorism. We've heard from Afghanistan also condemning and providing their condolences to the victims. Egypt came out and they also said that this is an act against humanity, and they called for a greater international effort in the fight against terrorism. We saw the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, who also came out, and he too said that post 9/11, Muslims have been collectively blamed for any form of act of terror around the world, and this current state of Islamophobia is part of the cause, part of the horrible massacre that happened in New Zealand, and also, of course, the OIC, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, also condemned the attack, but they've also provided a warning that this discourse of xenophobia, hatred, and Islamophobia that's being pushed, this agenda will cause further attacks if it continues this way.
Shahed, I want to go back and relate to something else I saw on your Twitter account. There was a discussion in which some people were raising the example or problem posed by radical Islamic extremism, which of course is also an issue. And I saw your response about saying, I worked on this at the highest clearance at the State Department, and there was no comparison between the attention given the two, meaning the two forms of extremism. It's long past time we correct that balance. What do you want to see, or what would you like to see that the U.S. governments be doing about the kind of ideological expression that may have inspired this young man in New Zealand?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think for a long time, we've neglected to either take down or to address some of the ideological postings that these people do to reinforce each other. We've kind of left them alone because we thought that they were some other country's problem. And if we can take it and treat it as an international issue and not a domestic issue, then that's when we work together across borders, across governments, and start giving it the resources that, for example, we have given against Islamist terrorism. That's what's going to be needed to stop this, because there is a blueprint now. This person literally did a video diary showing people how to do this. Muslims at prayer are incredibly vulnerable. They're literally standing next to each other, densely packed, with their backs towards you. And now there's a blueprint. And these people feel emboldened and empowered because the world is looking the other way. I think that has to end now, both as people and as governments.
Now, I want to relate to something, this manifesto, and I don't want to give publicity in a way, because this is part of the act, the reason this young man carried out this crime, to get his beliefs out there. But in his manifesto, he cited individual, let's say, not far-right commentators, but what we might call right-wing commentators in the U.S., to some of the discourse in the public sphere on Islam. How do you feel the society, particularly in the U.S., should possibly react to this kind of linkage?
Look, it's a very simple calculus. If people who are creating violence in the real world are inspired by your words, at the very least, you need to think about what you're saying and who you're inspiring. And I think those people who have been cited and whose work can be linked to these people need to be called to account and need to at the very least be encouraged to offer a solution to this, whether they temper their words or give more context or simply withdraw themselves from the public square. Anything that they can do will help, because these people are listened to.
And Omer, briefly, do you think Turkey and perhaps some of these Islamic countries are going to be speaking out more about some of the expressions that they see, for example, in discourse in the West?
Absolutely. I mean, Turkey, along with other Muslim countries, have long been calling for Islamophobia to be categorized as a hate crime, and they're constantly putting this issue at international arenas. And they want this to be now a real thing because it's continuing, the attacks are continuing, and they really want to push this to become a category for a crime, a hate crime against humanity. So we'll see more Muslim countries in international spaces and arenas pushing for this in particular.
Okay.